Hi, let's take a look under the hood of the Uniface 10 IDE. In the first movie, I'll give an introduction to the new IDE and discuss the high-level requirements. The second movie will be about design principle and the chosen technology to implement the IDE. The third movie is about the architecture, the model view controller concept that is used. The fourth movie is about the architecture, the view containment, a new way of building user interfaces in Uniface. The fifth movie is about data views, a special new type of components in Uniface. And then the last movie will be about a different way of allowing text entry. The Uniface IDE, or also known as UDE or the IDF, it exists as long as Uniface exists. It's the development environment in which you define your Uniface applications. Uniface 10 takes a radically different approach in development. Let's have a look. The user interface of the Uniface 10 IDE consists of three areas. Here at the top we see what we call the header. At the middle there is the editing area, and at the bottom there's the footer. Currently very empty because that's all work in progress still. I'm going to minimize that. At the header you'll find the navigation bar, search facilities, project management, and some additional menus. At the center area, that's where you do the core editing. There you will find, for example, the start page with the instructions for newcomers, but also all the open editors that you might have opened in a previous session. We're now looking at the component editor, easily recognizable on its icon, but also its prefix in the name, CPT. That's the shortcut, the mnemonic for component. So this is here, we're looking at the component editor. Within the component editor, you can see that there are three worksheets. The define structure worksheet, the write script worksheet, and the define layout worksheet. Again, very empty, it's all under construction. Let's have a look at the define structure worksheet. Within the define structure worksheet, you will again see always the same setup of the user interface. In the middle, there's the core editing area. At the right, there is most of the time a property inspector or some other means of inspecting information that you have selected in the center area. And at the left, there's the toolbox used for creation of new objects. If we're looking at the write script worksheet, you see a similar user interface. The central editing area, in this case with a navigation tree to navigate your code, and here a code editor to edit your proc script or your JavaScript. At the right, eventually there will be some sort of inspector that allows you to modify your selected code, and at the left there will be a toolbox allowing you to create new triggers or new pieces of proc modules. Let's have a closer look to the data structure area part of the define structure worksheet. You see here a grid within the first column, obviously the component structure itself, where you see the component, the entity, the fields, labels, etc. The remaining columns are then properties of the objects. Like for example, the description property, the data type property, database behavior properties, its type, etc. Eventually the idea is that you can select your own columns here to visualize certain properties, which is very useful. Especially if this component is not yours but somebody else's and you want to have a quick overview of the properties of the component, the objects in the component. If you want to look at more detailed information about the properties, you're going to use the property inspector. There you will see all the properties nicely categorized, and in here you will see the detailed descriptions, the name of the properties and its values. If I, for example, do a multi-select of the objects, then you will see the properties that are common to the selected objects. Now I selected an entity and 3 fields, so the set is not so big, but it still shows the properties that are shared by those object types. If the values is the same, you will see the actual value. If the values are not the same, you see an indicator that the values differ. But still, it allows to be updated. And you immediately see here that all the selected objects have their property being updated. In the Define Structure worksheet, it is possible to select multiple objects of different types, copy them onto the clipboard, and paste them in another component. As you can see, the structure, the original structure of the copied objects is maintained, and the properties as well as their code are copied. The toolbox here to the right allows easy navigation of template objects and modeled objects that you're typically going to use to create new objects in your component, and then drag them or copy paste them into your component. As its name indicates, the Write Script worksheet allows you to write script. That is either ProcScript or JavaScript for DSPs. As you can see, all proc modules of one object are conveniently organized in one big code module. So we have here the retrigger, entries in the local proc modules. So it allows quick navigation using the scroll bar or cursor keys to move from one container to the other, just like that. Now you can have a lot of code modules. So there is an easy navigation menu that allows you to quickly navigate to the modules that are defined in this object. There are 2 code boxes available for you to edit your code. So you can edit 2 objects simultaneously. And if it happens to be that you've selected the same object, there is an implicit synchronization between the 2 once you edit your code. Another new feature is the parameter help. If I want to here use a function that is relatively complex, I simply type in the operation, and then Uniface provides me with parameter assistance. So now I know that the first parameter is a string, so that's my source. My second parameter is a numeric, the third is the search for string, etc. To open another editor, I simply click this icon here, select the object type, and then the object itself. After which the editor will be opened for the selected object. Of course, if I know the name of this object, I simply type it in. As you can see, this object was already open, so I'm simply navigated to it. The IDE is also suited to be used on smaller sizes screens. When there is less real estate available, it might be the case that the user interface becomes a bit clumsy. You simply hide the left and the right areas by maximizing the center area, and then all the real estate is used for your core editing area. Of course, you can also undock one of the editors. If you're in the luxury of having 2 monitors, for example, you can edit and 2 components or 2 objects at the same time. There is a lot more that I can show you about the IDE, but for now, this is it. Let's go to the next subject. Our management was pretty clear when we started this project. They wanted us to think out of the box and not go for the obvious. Think of new ways of doing specific tasks, different user interfaces, different ways of navigation, all that kind of stuff. They wanted us not to be limited by technology. Obvious choice would be to use Uniface as the technology to build the IDE in, but using our own dog food was not a target of this project. Building a new IDE, that was the target, and if that required a different technology, then so it was. Uniface has its own specific development paradigm. The user interface of the new IDE should clearly show the tasks that need to be done to build an application in Uniface. The IDE should be responsive. Every click should immediately perform a specific task. The user should never have to wait for the tool. The user interface of the IDE should look familiar, not only to existing developers that have used the tools for years, but also to developers that are new to the product. They should easily find their way in the tool and get the job done. The tool should have better source control integration capabilities. At one side, we should have support sandbox development with a local file-based work area that can easily integrate with existing file-based source control systems. Whereas at the other end, we should keep the database-based repository that allows for team development on a shared repository. And then there was the idea to perform development in the cloud. An intriguing idea, but for now that was a couple of steps too far, and therefore we stuck to a fat client desktop application that was built for high development productivity. This does not mean that the tool couldn't run on a mobile device. It will run in desktop mode on any Windows 8 device with a proper amount of screen real estate. And then there was an additional list of features. Explorer-like navigation. The ability to have multiple editors open simultaneously. Smart and fast navigation, allowing navigation from one object to another over editors. Task-driven worksheets, property inspectors, auto-completion, parameter help, a source-based layout editor, etc, etc, etc. How to organize and convert this set on unrelated requirements, features and ideas. We'll talk about that in the second movie of this series of 6. Design principles and technology.